Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a video about the USS Enterprise set. Now this is a new boxing, a new collection of some previously released models. They are all in 1/2500th scale, so kind of that smaller scale of Star Trek model kits. And this is actually a nice companion piece to a set we did on the channel last year. So this is the collection from last year that was in 1/2500 scale. It was the Allies and Adversaries set, and it actually had 8 of these little models. From Deep Space Nine, we had the Defiant and the USS Saratoga. We had the NX-01 in its refit stage. So this is what the ship would have looked like if Enterprise had continued for a 5th season. From the original series, we have a Romulan Warbird and a Klingon D6 or D7 maybe. From the motion picture series, we have the Klingon Katinga and the Reliant from Star Trek II, and another one from Deep Space Nine, a Cardassian ship. And this was a pretty fun set. A lot of work kind of goes into these tiny little models. Also on the channel, we built the Enterprise D in 1/2500th scale, and while it's in the same scale, a vastly different size to the other little models that are in these 2500 scale kits. This USS Enterprise set is going to help flesh out that collection of 2500 scale ships with the NX-01 as it was seen in the show, not refit, the Enterprise from the Classics TV series, the USS Enterprise 1701A from the motion picture series, and the Enterprise B from Star Trek Generations, along with the D that is still available in a lot of hobby shops in the 1/2500 scale. This will give you a pretty nice collection of Enterprises, and the only ones that are really missing will then be the Enterprise C and the Enterprise E, which have model kits in 1/2500 scale, but they haven't been put out in a new release in a couple of years. All right, let's get in it. USS Enterprise set, we've already said what ships are in it. 4 models complete with individual display stands. Lots of decals. We'll look at those in a moment. Some more shots of the models painted and decals, and very nice to see pictures of the models themselves and not just production artwork. Okay, a couple more side views of those completely built models. And of course, a lot of these are pretty small, 3.5 inches, 3.5, 3.5 inches, and the Enterprise B will be the biggest one at about 7 inches. 58 pieces overall. All right, let's look at these individually. So our first bag just has our little mini display bases and the little arms that go onto those to hold the ships themselves. And that is nice. There have been times when they've released these little kits where they have not included bases, so it is nice to see them. And the first ones we're going to look at, looks like this bag will have the NX-01 and the TOS Enterprise, molded in kind of a nice gunmetal plastic. This would actually not look too bad if you just decaled right on the bare plastic. As far as the color goes, I'm still going to airbrush this with a better one, so you have a better sheen to it. But the nacelles come in halves. We've got the kind of warp sled there. And then I have no idea what these parts are. What are these? They're pretty large in structure. Looks like they might be some sort of part to go on the display bases, but that's kind of a mystery there. So that's the NX-01. Our second bag will be the, I keep wanting to call it an Excelsior, but it's the Enterprise B and the USS Enterprise 1701A. So in the bag, the Enterprise B is actually in 2 sprues. Actually, it might be 3. So we have a top and a bottom of the saucer. We have raised grid lines here for the Excelsior, which isn't great, but we can deal with it. So top and bottom of the saucer. I think I called it Excelsior again. Enterprise B, once again, raised grid lines on the hull of the Enterprise B, but overall a nice model, nice size. Here is a sprue with kind of a place for the display stand and that empty space in the bottom of the hull. Looks like that's probably the cargo bay, and of course the nacelles for the Enterprise B. And then once again, you know, this is the better molding of the Enterprise A in this scale. So interestingly, no grid lines, just smooth here for the saucer, which, since we'll be doing decals, that's probably better off than the raised ones. But kind of nice detailing. You can tell it's the new one because the deflector is a separate piece. So it should build up pretty well. Our instructions are pretty simple pictographs, and the construction will actually be pretty simple as well. All right, we'll do a little bit of building on camera just to show you a little bit of what's like. So there is some minimal cleanup. Kind of some real nice design choices here. So this sprue attachment point, it's hard to focus on something just plain white like this. The sprue attachment point here is in a place that will be covered up through other parts, so it's pretty easy to clean up. And since it was just kind of protruding a little bit, we're just going to use a little bit of an X-Acto blade to clean that up there. Okay, once again, some nice choices here where those sprues attached. So they attached here on the pylons. Once again, an edge that will be covered up by another piece, and they were attached down here on the bottom as well. And that part is simply going to fit inside of the other one there. Once again, just hard to focus on bright white like this. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better there in the shadow. This part's just going to go right inside the middle. You've got a nice little structure here that will be sandwiched between those two. So hopefully that'll provide a lot of strength. And this part is going to snap down around it. Trying to get some shadows here. You can see we've got a little bit of a nub. We're going to have to clean up right here along the bottom. That's where they attach to the sprues. The tiniest bit of sandpaper will clean that up. Now, just like the 1/1000 scale version of the TOS Enterprise, you do end up with some pretty rough gaps back here on the back, but hopefully a little bit of paint will fill that up plenty. All right, I have more parts off of the sprue and put together, so we're going to do a little bit more assembly. So I have gone ahead and I have joined together the two halves of the nacelles, and those simply get glued on to the refit just like this. You can see we have a slot and a tab. Okay, and snaps in place pretty well. That looks pretty straight, so we'll go ahead and add a little bit of glue. Same thing on the other side. Okay, that one went together a little bit nicer. Yep, looks pretty straight. And with that in place, we will now just simply add on the saucer. So that's kind of a nice connection there. You can see you go ahead and insert it like that and push the saucer down. And our last step will be simply to put this deflector dish on and glue it in place. This NX01 built up very much like the one did in the last set. So we have our kind of warp sled assembly here. It gets squeezed in to the saucer. While that is open, we will go ahead and add some glue. Of course, we're using Tamiya Thin, which is my glue of choice. Just melts these parts together. After that's glued in place, there are these little pieces that are top halves of the pylons. They fit on just like that, so I'm going to glue those on. With all that glued in place, now it's time just to glue the top of the saucer on to our lower one. All right, with that glue dry, we're going to go ahead and glue on our warp nacelles to the ship. Just a couple pegs into holes here, and then a little bit of glue. So our classic TOS Enterprise here builds up just like the refit does. So the Enterprise B is a little bit different, just more parts, larger size model. So we will have a little bit of a backing here towards these engines. So these should still be engines, and I believe these are shuttle bays. With those in place, we'll be able to close up our saucer. All right, so for the engineering hull, you do have an insert here for that structure at the underslung part of the fantail. Whether that is a cargo bay or docking port or just something unfinished on the ship, it is represented kind of by this structure. And this will also provide our hole for our stand. So we'll make sure it's very well glued in place. And we will also have to glue in place this piece, which provides our deflector dish in between those two halves of the engineering hull. Now, one nice thing about this build is once you have those in place and you're gluing this engineering hull together, you still have a lot of access in here to really make sure those are glued in solidly. We could just do a bead of super glue around those edges if we really wanted to. And a bead of a thick glue might be good there to help fill in that gap that I can already see. To complete the saucer, we're going to go ahead and glue this top deck on. This is where our pylons will attach. The warp nacelles for the Enterprise B are split down the middle vertically. So you can see there you have a left half and a right half. Those get glued together, so each nacelle is just two parts. And then they get mounted on this pylon assembly. Now my pylon assembly, you can see it has some warped parts right out of the box. Not a big deal. We will just glue those in place as we glue these together. All right, to finish off the Enterprise B, we are simply going to glue the engineering hull to the saucer section after connecting it just like that. And then we will be snapping in the pylon assembly like that. I'll add some glue and the Enterprise B will be completed. Well, we're real close to wrapping up this video, but I want to talk about these two little models here first. The classic TOS Enterprise and the refit Enterprise. Now, you'll notice I did not really spend much time on the video taking the TOS Enterprise off the sprue or building it, and, well, I did. I filmed taking off the sprue and I filmed videoing it, but I had some big facts wrong as I did it, so I had to cut that out of the video. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But I want to talk about the refit Enterprise here. Now, this is actually not the same refit Enterprise as was in the 3 Enterprise set from the 90s. This is an upgraded tooling that Round 2 did in the 2010s when they did their cadet series. So when they rolled out their motion picture set with the Enterprise and the Reliant and the Klingon Katinga, they redid the refit. So this is not the one that everybody used to have in all those old kits. Now, the big difference is the smooth saucer, all the raised grid lines removed, which is absolutely more in scale. And on the original version, the deflector dish was not a separate piece. The deflector dish was molded into the two halves of the engineering hull. So you'd have a big seam right down the front of that deflector. So this is a much more modern version of the Enterprise refit, and it's a pretty good looking little piece. Now this classic TOS Enterprise model, this model has been unchanged since I believe 1988 or 1989 when it first came out in that 3 Enterprise set. And this is definitely the piece in this kit that is aged the most. We'll try and get in close here. So you can really just see some ugly detail molded on, some big blocky out of scale windows molded on. You can see those rectangles just molded on to the outside pylons. Completely out of place. There should only be 3 of them. They should be higher up. The kind of concentric circles around the saucer, those are probably fine, but then they've got more of those square windows just kind of planted on. All of that kind of out of scale and unnecessary. Looks good from the top. Nice smooth saucer, nice bridge detail. That's kind of nice. I apologize for not covering the TOS in the video, but once again, as I was building it, I was saying some things that were inaccurate and incorrect about that, so I had to cut that out. Well, there you go. We have built our 4 little models here in this set. Now we still have a lot of work to do, but that's going to have to be on the next video. Still a lot of work. We have to do the base coat of paint, choosing the right colors for that, a little bit of detail painting on each one of these, and then a lot of decaling. Let's take a quick look at these 4 models because they are fairly impressive once you get to look at them up close. All right, the first one to look at will be the NX-01 as seen in Star Trek Enterprise. You see it is a small model, just about 3.5 inches, but a lot of nice detail, recessed grid lines, and on something like this, yes, those grid lines will be out of scale, but it is a nice amount of detail to be put in. This is just molded in its base color, which is a nice gunmetal or pewter. Now, in the last set of these little models we did, we had the NX-01 refit. So this should give you a good idea of what it may look like once you have painted it and decaled it. So you can see little bits of paint there, the red for the nacelles. Hopefully you can see back here on the nacelles we have some blue inlays there. There's actually a little bit of gold there in the back of the nacelles, and then a lot of decals to really provide some nice detailing. So hopefully in the next video we'll take this from its unpainted to something closer to this, but that is the NX-01 in its original non-refit shape. After that we have the TOS Enterprise, and this model is probably the only one that really seems like it'll be a little bit of a challenge. You know, it might be worth sanding off those ridiculous raised windows that are all over this ship. There's a good look at them, especially those on the pylons. Those, it's probably worth sanding off. The concentric rings underneath there, that's probably okay. Nice and smooth across the top, that looks just fine. But a lot of painting here to be done, and well, we'll have to see what this back seam looks like after we have a little bit of our base coat on it, but maybe a little bit of filling back there. Next up, we have the Enterprise refit, or the 1701A, and it looks nice. You know, it's got all the right shapes. It's got a little bit of detail on it. Nothing overly exaggerated. I think grid lines, once again on this scale, if you put grid lines in, they're usually pretty out of scale. Just like the classic Enterprise, we'll probably have some gaps there to fill on the back of that engineering hull, but pretty nice. I'm most excited probably about this one, and here it is with its scene mate, the USS Reliant. So once again, just like that NX-01, kind of consider this one a before, this one an after. This is kind of the leveling of detailing we'll have once we get it painted and decaled. So should be a pretty nice compliment right there. I have a little Wrath of Khan scene here with the Enterprise and the Reliant. And the final model to look at will be the Enterprise B, the Excelsior class ship, or the Excelsior refit class ship, and considerably larger than our other Enterprises. Here we can see those two together, so you can see the Enterprise B about twice as long. Like the classic Enterprise, you know, it does have those raised lines for the detailing. You know, with a bigger ship like this, not quite as out of scale. If you really want to, that would be another thing you could sand off and just let the decals do the work. But really kind of nice. There's enough little landmarks here where you really could just do a lot of detail painting if that's something you wanted to do. There's that kind of weird cargo bay or machine room on the back of the Enterprise class ships. I'm sorry, Excelsior class ships. And once again, raised lines all across that secondary hull. Yeah, no, very nice. There's a good canvas here to work on. I'm very excited to see all of these kind of detailed and ready to go. All right, this is another model set where at one point I thought, you know, it's going to be slap it together, glue it together, airbrush it once, put some decals on it, and you're going to be done. But as I really start looking at this, there is a lot more to it. So in the next video, we're going to come back, we're going to do the base coat, the detail painting, the decaling. Then we'll really show this set off with kind of the lineage and the different scenes you can set up with the things like the Enterprise D in this same scale that we saw earlier, and the scenes you can set up with that Allies and Adversaries set. So I'm going to take my time, probably be another week for me to actually get these finished, but then we'll do a video showing you how to finish up these kits, show them off with all of their kind of scene mates and movie mates, and we'll have a really cool look at this set. So thank you guys for following this video. Thank you for following the channel, and I'll be back very soon.